Hey, everybody, welcome into the program. It's Suits and Laterals with Mitch Gatsky and Evan Skilleter. How you doing, Ev?
Awesome. Good week of football and a good week coming up. So, did you have a good Thanksgiving?
I had a great Thanksgiving. And, it's kind of hard to be in a bad mood during the holidays unless you got some kind of personal problems going on. Great food, good family. Got to catch up with some friends the night before Thanksgiving on a crazy night out at the bars. And yeah, it's just been a solid week for me.
I think that's my favorite part of Thanksgiving is the night before when all
Yes.
your friends are back in town, back to celebrate with their families, and the night before you all get together and wreak havoc on your
Yes.
hometown, right?
Blackout Wednesday.
Yeah, is that what it's actually called?
I haven't heard anybody call it that, but that's what I'm going with. Yeah, because Black
So,
Friday's the day after, so Blackout
uh,
Wednesday I think is the day before.
yeah, so I was actually I didn't I had 3 beers the whole night, but from 8 o'clock all the way until like 2 in the morning. So
Yeah.
I was just having fun, just hanging out with friends and talking and getting having drinks is good and
It
fun,
is.
but conversationalist. So I had a really good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into some football, Ev, because a lot happened this past weekend. A lot is going to happen this weekend. A huge slate of games that we will start to break down later in the show. But let's start off with probably the funniest thing that happened over the weekend. Did you see what the Ravens did to finish off their game against the Bengals?
Yes, that was fantastic. I've seen a play similar to that before, actually. Um, so for any listener that didn't get to see it, basically there were 11 or 12 seconds left on the clock, and the Ravens were up by plenty, more than two, and they got in a punt formation, took the snap, and then every lineman for the Ravens just grabbed the guy in front of him for the Bengals, right, and just held on to him while the punter stood there instead of kicking the ball, let the clock run out, and then went backward and out of bounds
Yeah,
in the end zone,
through the
right?
back of the
So,
end zone. Yeah,
so
safe.
what happens? The result of that play is a safety. There are multiple holding penalties, obviously, but the result of the play is a safety, which gives the other team points, which means that they don't play another untimed down.
Right.
So the Ravens won and didn't have to give the ball back, despite the fact that they had 10 holding calls. So,
Yeah.
have you seen anything like it?
I've seen it happen before. I want to say it was the Michigan Penn State game last year. And I think there have been other instances of this where it's a similar situation. You're kind of in the same spot on the field, but there was less time on the clock. So what the team did was just snap the ball through the back of the end zone and let the time run off. You know, same effect, just you didn't have as much time to get rid of. I thought it was great because the NFL has got this rule where um, the game cannot end on a defensive, or it cannot end on a defensive penalty, right? But it can end on an offensive penalty. And because the Ravens still had the ball technically, they were on offense. I just like that somebody had the presence of mind to look at the rule book and say, hey, we can exploit this. And they did, and it worked, and they got the win, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all that it was a Harbaugh at the helm, probably calling that play. So, yeah, some people are irritated, and some people say, well, they need to change that rule and blah, blah, blah.
Oh,
Well,
sure, but are you
I,
irritated at the Ravens? I mean, I don't think you can be. They're just playing the game.
I'm not. I personally am not. But there are plenty of people that are. Remember, I'm from Ohio, so I have a lot of Bengals fans surrounding me all the time. So that's more,
Fair
you know,
enough.
probably more bitterness, bitterly disappointed in the referee. Um, Pardon me, Mitchell. But yeah, so I personally think that the rule could change, but at this point, it doesn't matter. The Ravens won the game abiding by the rule book. So there's nothing to be mad about. Um,
So why
do you
haven't
think
we
do you think they
given?
should change it?
I think they should change it, and I think they will. Uh, just because you don't want that to happen. You don't want that to start happening more routinely. Um, when it's obvious that they're just, doing what they have to get the game over. Um, and yeah, I think they will change it, but that won't happen until the off season. So if it does come up again, it'll be interesting to see if another team does this because you can't just change the rules in the middle of the season. So I mean, this is in place until the off season until they can address it. I'll be interested to see if anybody else tries to take advantage of that loophole. But I have to ask you, the Ravens are on top of their division. Why haven't we given them any sort of publicity, any sort of love? Nothing for the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens aren't really an exciting team to watch.
No.
They have Steve Smith Jr. or Senior or whatever he is. He's Steve Smith. And he's a great receiver. He's chatty. He's kind of the villain that people like to pay attention to, kind of like Terrell Owens was or Chad Ochocinco Johnson was. So he's kind of interesting, but the rest of the Ravens really aren't that flashy. They aren't that exciting. The running game is just kind of whatever. They have Terrence West back there who I bet half of NFL fans have never heard of. Joe Flacco he's a great quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but when I ask you, who your favorite quarterback is, he's probably below 10th on the list. I mean, he's just not a guy that many people pay attention to. So,
yeah.
And the other thing is the fact that the Ravens are leading their division, sure, but they're 6-5. So it's not like they've been beating teams up and they're just an awesome team. In fact, in their division, they've scored less touchdowns or fewer touchdowns than anyone else in the division. And that includes the Cleveland Browns. So they're just not a very exciting team.
Yet they've beaten each divisional opponent. They've beaten the Browns twice. And they're allowing just 75 yards on the ground per game. That's tops in the league. So they do things well. It's just for some reason they haven't been able to string together a complete game week in, week out. And they've got, I believe, they play they'll play the Bengals again and they play the Steelers again. It's still all in front of them, but I just don't see them getting the job done because I don't really know, other than stopping the run, I don't know what they hang their hat on. And when it comes time to chase down a playoff spot, you need to be able to rely on something. And that's why I don't really think the Ravens will be able to do it. I think the Steelers, you've been talking about them all year as the favorite in that division. And I think the next time that they play, you'll see them kind of exchange positions where Steelers take over the division, Ravens kind of fall back out of the playoff picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head when you said you need something to rely on down the stretch, right? And Baltimore doesn't have that. The Steelers definitely do. And the good thing about the Steelers is that they can rely on the pass if they need to, or they can rely on the ground game if they need to. And Baltimore, they're just kind of middle of the road when it comes to those two things. Right now, they are 4-0 against divisional opponents. They've beaten the Browns twice and the Steelers and Bengals once each. So if you can stay positive in your record against divisional opponents, you're in good shape. But I do believe the Steelers do have the best chance still.
So the Ravens will be playing the Dolphins this coming weekend. That's one of the games that we're going to get into later. But the Dolphins are hot, Ev. They are the hottest team other than the Cowboys. They made a goal line stand this past week, won their sixth straight game, 31-24 over the 49ers. And basically, I want to know, can the Dolphins catch the Patriots? Because right now, they're only, I believe, 2 games behind. They've got a shot in my mind. They really do, because the Patriots all of a sudden don't look like the world beaters that they were a few weeks ago. I think that door's open for Miami.
Well, that's a tough one because the Patriots, while they haven't looked like the greatest team, they're still a very good and very solid team. Um, moving forward, the last 5 games of the season, the Dolphins have the Ravens, Cardinals, Jets, Bills, and Patriots. And they play the Patriots at home in the last week of the season, which is interesting because at the moment the Dolphins are 5-1 at home. So I don't know. I'm struggling to say that because the Patriots are still 2 games in front of them. They're 9-2, and they still have that year. Man, I would put my money on the Patriots only because they're just so solid and so consistent. And I know you can make the argument that the Dolphins have rattled off, what'd you say, 6 in a row?
6 in a
That's
row.
right. Steelers, Bills, Jets, Chargers, Rams, 49ers. That's right. So, yeah, I mean, I have nothing else to say about that except for it's possible, but I don't think it will happen. I don't think Tannehill is quite consistent enough, quite reliable enough to get the job done for them.
I'm glad you mentioned his name.
What are you thinking?
I'm glad you mentioned Tannehill's name, because quickly I wanted to mention that Ryan Tannehill, during this win streak, completing 68% of his passes, 1,302 yards, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. The Dolphins, during this 6-game win streak, have turned the ball over just twice. That's tops in the NFL. Jay Ajayi has emerged as a reliable runner. He had a couple of consecutive 200-yard rushing games earlier during that win streak. And I don't know. I mean, if they can get this win against the Ravens, all bets are off. You can put your money on the Pats, but I say watch out for the Dolphins because they're coming and they look like they know what they're doing.
Okay. Well, that's something to watch going forward. I still put my money with the Patriots. Patriots defense, we can talk about their offense being kind of lackluster, lacking playmakers maybe, but their defense is just outstanding. I think they might have the fewest points against in the NFL right now. Second fewest points against in the NFL. Third. Okay, so it's Seahawks and then Vikings and then Patriots. So third best defense. And I think the Dolphins 240 points against, which is second fewest in the division, and it's among other teams, it's toward the bottom. So I still go with the Patriots.
Evan, the Buccaneers beat the Seahawks in really what was an ugly 14-5 game. And the Tampa defense deserves all the credit for this one. They turned Seattle over 3 times, including each of the Seahawks' last 2 possessions after the Bucs had turned it over twice themselves to set those drives up. So the defense bailed out the offense a couple of times down the stretch. The Buccaneers won the time of possession, and they got a solid win at home against a team that last week we were talking about, or at least I was talking about, being the NFC favorite. What do you think about the Bucs playoff chances?
Well, yeah, they're 6-5 right now, and they're only a game back from of the Falcons. The Falcons are 7-4. Jameis Winston, he's had a couple rough games this year. Five interception game, I think, maybe 4. And just kind of struggling to find consistency. But their defense is great. They play in a division where teams score a lot of points, and they've given up the fewest out of all of them, and that's Falcons, Saints, and Panthers. So if the Bucs can keep playing defense and Jameis can keep, or at least find some sort of consistency, I think the Bucs have a chance. They're the only team in the division that plays defense. They're 4-1 on the road. They're 2-1 against division opponents. The Panthers are struggling. The Saints are they're back and forth. Their defense is pretty bad. So I like the Bucs' chances of getting in. I think right now a wild card spot isn't out of the realm of possibility. I mean, there are a lot of teams sitting at 6-5. The Bucs, the Vikings, who I don't see the Vikings being a contender here in a couple weeks. But other than that, other than division leaders, I mean, look across the board. You have Dallas leading the East, and they're at 10-1. The Lions are leading the North, 7-4. The Falcons are 7-4, leading the South, and the Seahawks are 7-3-1. But then, as for the second place teams across the board, the Giants are 8-3. I think they have a pretty good shot of getting in. But then the Vikings are 6-5. The Bucs are 6-5. And the Cardinals are 4-6. They're second place in the West. The West is just beating up on each other right now. So I do like the Bucs' chances of getting in.
The Raiders passed another test. They staved off the Panthers 35-32. Evan, this was a rather wild game, especially down in the fourth quarter, down the stretch. The Raiders jumped out to an early lead. The Panthers came roaring back with 17 unanswered points at one point, I believe. And Derek Carr dislocated the pinky finger on his throwing hand. That looked really ugly. And I just read an article before we came on air here. Turns out he dislocated it in 2 spots, which but he comes back out. He's got a glove on, and he leads the team to victory. And it's just, I think week after week, we're seeing Jack Del Rio's Raiders take those steps to becoming, they're going from being a team with potential that everybody was talking about at the beginning of the year. We were certainly on the bandwagon. We're seeing them mature and become real contenders here, and it's been very fun to watch.
Yeah, just like we mentioned or like I mentioned with Tannehill not being consistent and Flacco not really being elite or being a quarterback that you can kind of rely on, Carr has really proven to be that kind of guy, right? I mean, a guy that – think about Ben Roethlisberger. He's a really tough guy. Everyone thinks he's tough. Well, most people think that he's tough. And he's led the Steelers for countless years, and just he's been a battler, right? He's been a warrior. And Derek Carr, while he's been consistent throughout the year, putting up big numbers, now we just saw Carr dislocate a finger on his throwing hand, throw a glove on, and go out there and beat the Panthers in a comeback victory, right? And the thing I like about the Raiders the most, just like with the Steelers that I mentioned earlier, they can rely on the passing game if they need to, or they can go to the ground game and rely on that, right? They're top 6 in the NFL in rushing and in passing, and they're just an incredible team to watch, and I'm really excited about the Raiders. I almost like them against the Patriots, to be honest with you.
Ooh, that's interesting there. That's very interesting. We could get into the Sunday night game, but basically, I just thought the Chiefs out-Broncoed the Broncos and won 30-27 in overtime. Is that pretty much how you saw it?
Yeah, it was a good game. I mean, those are two pretty good teams. 8-3 Chiefs, 7-4 Broncos, and two very good defenses, tops in the AFC. So, yeah, I really like those two teams, and that was definitely a battle, and it showed that division is probably the strongest top to bottom in the NFL right now.
Huge slate of games this weekend, Ev. First of all, I think this is the first legitimate Thursday night football game that we've had all season. It's Cowboys at Vikings, and I'm actually excited.
Yeah, absolutely should be. The Vikings defense, while their offense has been putrid, their defense has been great, and we finally have a really, really big test for the Cowboys and that offensive line. It'll be really, really fun to watch to see how Dak plays against them and how the offensive line can block for Ezekiel Elliott. So really looking forward to that game.
Putrid, vocab word of the week. Thank you, Evan. I'm gonna keep saying it. The Cowboys cannot keep this up. They've simply been too good, and at some point that's got to end. But I want to try to make this comparison, and I think you're a good person to ask because you're a Kentucky basketball fan. So is it almost like the Kentucky Wildcats where you hope that the Cowboys lose and kind of get it out of their system before the playoffs? Because it seems like that's kind of what we talk about with Kentucky sometimes is can they lose a couple of games before the tournament so they know how that feels, to kind of get it out of the way. It's a bit of a ridiculous theory, but do you buy into it at all?
That's an interesting question. So I would have to say that, with Kentucky basketball, that team is full of 18-year-old kids, 18, 19, some 20-year-old kids,
right?
That are playing together for the first time in their lives. So for a team like that, you definitely want to see some sort of adversity in the season and see how they react to it and see how they kind of overcome it. Now, a team like the Cowboys, I know they're being led by a rookie running back and a rookie quarterback, but they've lost once or maybe even twice now. I'm not sure what's
the once.
Just once. Yeah. So, they tasted it early on, and they've been playing like they're hungry, right? I don't think they need to lose again. I don't think it'd be bad for them by any means. It might be sort of good for them, but I don't think they need to lose. I wouldn't be, if I was a Cowboys fan, I wouldn't be rooting for a loss because these guys are playing great, and they do have veteran leadership on the team. That offensive line is fantastic. I wouldn't call Des Bryant a leader, but at least he's been around for a while. And in fact, it's been fun to watch because Dak Prescott is almost taking over those leadership roles. I mean, on and off the field. Did you see the big story on him just picking up a piece of trash and throwing it in the trash can? Did you see that?
Yes, I did see that.
What did you make of that?
I thought it was great. It's like a normal guy. It's something that I would do. You always try to make that shot into the trash can and you say Kobe as you're fading away, but when you miss, you got to go pick that up. And I thought it was great that Dak did that, and pretty cool that, a story like that comes out. Yeah.
So it's a really simple gesture, but that's one of those things that just shows, and it sounds kind of weird, but it shows maturity.
It does.
When a guy who has a ton of attention, probably him and Ezekiel Elliott both are at the very top of the NFL mountain right now as far as attention goes, right? Everybody's watching them every single week. Everyone's critiquing the way they play. Everyone's talking about how Dak's arm strength is a little bit weak and this and that. Yet the guy's still winning games. But with all eyes on him, he's still able to just be himself, be a good guy, and continue to play. And I think it shows that he's not above throwing something away, right? He's still, even though he's this monumental figure, he still walks over and does the simple things in life that are important to do. And I think he's handling all this very well. And I just really like not only how good the Cowboys are, but I like their attitudes. Other than Des Bryant, which is a whole nother story.
Yeah, there's probably a whole show in that. But the Vikings offense, putrid, as you mentioned, still, they have the third overall defense in terms of yards, total yards against, 307 per game. They're fourth in passing yards allowed at just under 207. So it's going to be up to Ezekiel Elliott, and if there's anybody that can come through, it's him. I'm very excited to see him on Thursday night. And, yeah, I'm basically just excited that there's going to be a good Thursday night football game.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? Are there any other games specifically that you are looking forward to on Sunday?
Oh, yeah, a lot of games.
Or Monday?
Chiefs-Falcons, great defense versus great offense. Who do you give the edge to? It's in Atlanta.
I like the Chiefs.
Lions going to the Saints, and really, I just really dislike the Saints ever since they won Super Bowl 44. And then they beat the Lions in the wild card game in 2011. And then the Bounty Gate stuff came out. Drew Brees and Sean Payton, it's all just too much. I really am hoping that the Lions can go down to New Orleans, get some revenge for that wild card game, and really put them some distance between themselves and the Vikings and the Packers. How do you see it playing out? Can my Lions get the win?
Yeah, the Lions can get the win. The Saints defense is terrible. Stafford should be able to throw all over them. Now, that secondary, we talked about it last week. They're the Lions secondary, that is. We talked about it last week, and they were, you mentioned that they're not very impressive, which you were right up to that point. But I think they kind of showed up on Thursday.
Well, one guy in particular, the guy that I called out, Darius Big Play Slay, came through and got a huge interception to set the Lions up for that game-winning field goal on Thanksgiving. That was awesome. He must listen. That's the only reason I can think of. That
not only was that a big interception, but it was a great play. So yes. Slay actually came off his own man to make the interception on a pass thrown to somebody else. Right, so he was able to turn around, read the play, come off his man, and pick off that ball in a big spot. That was very impressive, and kind of, I hope for the Lions' sake that's a sign of things to come. I like the Lions in this one.
The Texans are clinging to a division lead. The Packers are clinging to hope of climbing back in it. Games in Green Bay. Who's going to win, Ev?
Man, it's been so hard to pick the Packers lately, hasn't it?
It really has.
That game's kind of a toss-up being in Green Bay. But if I was putting money down, that's tough. I guess I'd go Packers with it just being in Green Bay. I'm not really sold on Brock Osweiler yet. Not that I'm sold on anybody on the Packers, but I'll go Green Bay.
I mentioned the Dolphins are the hottest team not named. The Cowboys having won 6 straight. The Ravens have won 3 of 4. That only loss coming at Dallas. My question for you in this one is the winner of this game suddenly a legitimate AFC playoff contender?
A contender to get into the playoffs?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I'll definitely say that. Dolphins would move to what, 8-5, 8-4,
8-4, I believe.
The Ravens would get at least another week of being on top of their division. So yeah, I'll say that.
The Bills are a tough team to figure out. They're kind of up and down, but they're also a tough team to play. Can the Raiders keep passing these weekly tests? Because they can't afford to look behind them. The Chiefs and the Broncos are right behind them. Can the Raiders continue to get the job done this weekend?
Yeah, I think they'll be fine against the Bills. The Bills are tricky, though, because they've had defensive performances where they've really, really impressed. I believe they had like 4 or 5 turnovers against the Cardinals earlier this year. So, Derek Carr's going to have to play hard, but he's got some really, really good players around him, and I think the Raiders will take care of business.
The Giants, like the Ravens, haven't gotten much love, but they're at 8-3, and they've won their last 6 games. They're going to be in Pittsburgh, and the Steelers are still very much in it, with games remaining against all 3 of their division rivals. Can they keep pace with the Ravens and really make this a run down the stretch here of the season for the AFC North?
Well, they're going to have a tough time against the Giants, I think. Offensively, they'll probably score some points, but the Giants are playing really well offensively, and the Steelers' defensive secondary it's got some holes in it. So I like the Giants. That's another tough game to pick, but I would take the Giants in that, and the Steelers better hope that the Dolphins beat the Ravens if that's the case, because they don't want to fall too far behind.
And Panthers-Seahawks on Sunday night. That should be a good one. What are you looking for in that one? Don't
I,
necessarily need a pick. What are you looking for in that one?
well, I'll give you a pick because I don't think it's going to be that great of a game.
Oh,
I think
okay.
it's in Seattle in prime time, and the Panthers have been struggling on both sides of the ball, and the Seahawks, other than the fact that they couldn't take care of business against the Buccaneers, the Seahawks are great, and especially at home. And I don't think they'll have any problem against the Panthers. Um, what do I look for? I look for Cam Newton to finally start doing something.
He did a
He's
little
had
something last week in Oakland.
eh,
That's why I ask, because they didn't get the win, but they damn near did.
yeah, you're right. That's a good point, but he's gonna he did it consistently last year. In this year, he hasn't, and so if he wants to somehow bring the Panthers back to a playoff berth, he's really going to have to show us something in Seattle in prime time. I think since that's a Monday night game, you're probably not going to give me another one. But
That's the Sunday night game, but you're right. I don't have
oh,
another.
sorry,
The Monday night game this week is real weak. I can't remember who it is.
Colts and Jets. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
forget it.
terrible. But I do want to mention that the Chargers-Bucks game is actually kind of a big one, considering the fact that the Chiefs play the Falcons. If what I think comes true and the Chiefs beat the Falcons, this game becomes huge for the Bucks because a win would tie them with the Falcons for the top spot in that division. So I think the Bucks can get it done against the Chargers. Mike Evans has been playing really well. But that becomes a huge game if the Falcons do indeed lose.
Game is in San Diego, correct?
It is, yeah.
Big test for a young team. Ev, that's it for me. You got anything else?
Do you have a player of the week?
Yes.
Cool.
You first.
Yeah, well, I just mentioned Mike Evans. He's definitely the player of the week for me. He had 2 touchdowns, caught 8 passes, 104 yards, which is a nice performance. But the biggest thing for me is that it was against Seattle. One of his touchdown catches came against Richard Sherman, and I believe that's only the second touchdown Sherman's allowed all year. So, big game for Mike Sherman. Big game for Mike Evans against a really good team.
I got to go with my man Darius Slay, just because I called him out and he stepped up and shut me up. So there you go, player of the week. First defensive player of the week, I believe. Yeah,
he emailed the show and he was really pissed off at you. So
I've given a player of the week to a kicker and now a cornerback. And
a kicker that had hit half of his field goals. That was awesome.
I'm just saying.
Hey, to be fair, Aguayo's really come around. He's starting to hit a lot more field goals and starting to be a little more consistent. So
since I gave him some love, I'm just trying to spread the love.
Hey, look at that. You need to start giving some love to Browns players, and maybe they'll turn their lives around.
Okay, Terrell Pryor got totally called out by Janoris Jenkins on Twitter and took the high road and said that he respected his game or something. I shout out to Terrell Pryor because could have got ugly. Jenkins really went at his throat and called him like a sorry player or something.
Yeah, it was stupid stuff.
Just didn't like his game at all, but Pryor took the high road. Shout out to him. That's going to do it for me. What are my 3 things, Ev? It's
something about
support your local businesses, tip handsomely, and say your please and thank yous. Follow me on Twitter @GreatGatsky. That's it. Take us home.
Hey, catch me on Twitter @EvansSkilleter. You can email the show at hello@suitsandlaterals.com. We'll both see it. So if you have something mean to say it. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure you like the show, subscribe, review, share it, whatever you can do. We'd appreciate it. Thanks for listening. And until next time, stay right and stay real.